This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is the Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Anderson. Alongside me, as always, is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And Dave is on vacation.
It is so much room, Sean.
It is the off season, so we're taking breaks left and right. I was out for 2 weeks. Dave's going to be out this week. He'll be back next week. And then you took your weeks off for vacation.
Yeah, I took my only week off. That's the only one I get.
And today we are going to be talking about our rankings for the shooting guard. We're keeping that going along. We ranked the starting shooting guards for next season, 2018-2019 season for the NBA. And we also have a special topic. We're going to kick it off with our patron, Jake. But before we bring on Jake, we are going to do some housekeeping before that. Check out mostvaluablepodcast.com if you have never checked us out before. That's going to be your one-stop shop for all our podcast segments, all our full podcasts, any articles that are posted. And you can also find our store up there. So if you want to buy an MVP t-shirt, definitely go over to mostvaluablepodcast.com. Also, if you are listening on iTunes and you want to give us a rating, you want to help us grow a little bit more, we'd appreciate the 5-star rating on the Fast Break Podcast. It will help us grow and get us seen by more people. And finally, patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast, because we are welcoming in our buddy Jake. He is at the $10 tier, and I think this is like the 8th month or something like that. Or no, it's more than 8. It's closing in on...
Jake is our...
It's 10.
He's our longest running patron. He's over $100 now that he has given us in a lifetime.
We don't need to release people's financials.
All right.
But it's been 10 months, and we're glad that Jake is back on us. And Jake, you wanted to talk Sixers because apparently you've been talking too much crap about them recently, huh?
Yeah, it's just kind of like snuck into random segments. It's not very appreciated over here.
Yeah, and we had our first Patreon, a little spat of Patreon beef. Where Bill was calling out the Sixers in a K-Love segment, apparently, and Jake did not take too kindly to that, as Ricky called.
Yeah.
But today we're going to be talking about Philadelphia 76ers expectations for the 2018-2019 season. We kind of did this with, you guys kind of did this with Z, with the Suns last year. Not last year, last month. And we're talking about the Sixers now. Obviously, this was a team that, in some people's minds, over-exceeded expectations. Definitely in the minds of Colin Cowherd. Winning 52 games last year, having an incredible end of the season, winning 15 straight games, going on a magical 15-game winning streak for this young team. Jake, we'll just start it off easy. Obviously, there's been some off-season additions. There's been some off-season deletions to this team. Do you think 52 wins is surmountable for this team, or do you think this team could even exceed 52 wins going into next year?
I think 52 wins is a pretty good target. I think they didn't really add much this offseason. I think, honestly, their biggest addition is going to be wherever Markelle Fultz falls. I think getting Wilson Chandler is a good veteran to have off the bench, but he's not going to wow anybody, really. I think 52 wins, I'd say 52 to 56 is where I'd have them this year, especially with the end of their schedule and how easy it is. I think at the end they could get on a win streak like they did last year.
Yeah, and you lost Bellinelli, you lost Ilyasova, you re-signed Amir Johnson, lost Rashawn Holmes, he was traded to the Phoenix Suns, brought in Jonah Bolden, and then also brought in Mike Muscala, but losing Timothy Lualo, Cabaret, and then also losing Brian Colangelo. So how much do you think that move and that whole debacle with Brian Colangelo, his wife, and the burner accounts is going to affect the 76ers, especially with Brett Brown being the man that's leading basketball operations going into this year?
Yeah, I believe in Brett Brown. I don't think he's a very good GM. I think you can see in kind of the trades they've made and everything. He I guess he gave up on a couple of players because I was pretty upset when they traded TLC. I didn't think Cabarrot had to go. I think that was just that was a big subtraction because he is a project, but he's still young. He was very good defensively. He just had to work on his offensive game. And then you also get rid of Rashawn Holmes and you re-sign Amir Johnson. And I think I've made my feelings very clear about Amir Johnson. He's just a waste of space when he's on the court. And I think he won, the Hustle Award or something like that, I saw, Amir Johnson. I think Rashawn Holmes was basically just a high-energy guy off the bench, and that's really all you need behind Embiid. And hopefully Embiid's minutes can be moved up this year. Here's hoping at least. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt. And I think the whole debacle with Brian Colangelo, I never liked how he was forced in the first place. So I kind of never really liked him. But the whole burner account thing, I think it was pretty obvious that he did it. And then his wife tried to take blame for it to save his job. But they do need to hire a GM, and I don't know what they're doing. At this point, I'm just assuming they're not going to sign a GM until next offseason because I haven't even heard like they've interviewed anybody or anything yet.
Mm-hmm. And the only rumbling, so I think we've heard about the 76ers and their GM, Ricky, has been their attempt to at least sign away good old our boy Daryl Morey from the Houston Rockets.
And that's obviously why would you leave Houston for? I mean, yes, Houston now has to deal with LeBron James in the West, but I mean, why would you leave the Rockets, who are right there battling with the Warriors, and were about, I don't know, a couple made twos away from the final?
Well, and that was also his baby. I mean, his whole goal is to beat the Warriors. So maybe at some point they'll be able to swindle Daryl Morey away from the Rockets and bring him over to Philadelphia, which would be a great addition. But right now, it does not look like they're going to be hiring a GM. What do you think the expectation should be set at for the 76ers? Is 52 wins at least plausible?
For me, I feel like at the very least, the 76ers should be looking at it and going, you know what? We have to finish top, at the very least, we have to be a top 3 seed in the East. The best you guys could probably do, pie in the sky, you're the number 1 seed for some reason. But the realistic goal for me would be, can we get the 2 seed this year? With Toronto losing their coach of the year, head coach, because they're like, we're just going to part ways. We're going to trade DeMar DeRozan to the Spurs to get Kawhi Leonard. We still don't know what that experiment is going to look like. I wouldn't be surprised if fans like Jake kind of sit there and go, you know what? Maybe we can be the 2 right behind the Celtics. Because how I look at it going, the Celtics are my number 1 favorite to win the East this year. Then it's like, what are we going to see from the Sixers and Raptors? And how are they going to play out? Because I was watching The Jump this week, and I thought they were kind of jumping the gun a little bit by saying,
good one.
Oh, that opening, it was like either the Christmas Day matchup or the opening day to the season. They're like, is that Sixers Celtics going to be an Eastern Conference final game? And everyone's like, yes. And I'm like, don't count out the Raptors, especially if Kawhi Leonard is playing the whole year.
Yeah, Jake, that's something I want to bring up because we talked about it a little bit before we started, and Ricky mentioned that he had the 76ers as of now. I mean, it doesn't mean anything because it's August right now.
3 seed.
But he had the Sixers losing to the Raptors in the second round, and you kind of scoffed at that. Do you think that the Sixers, at least but do you think the expectation for Sixers fans should be that this team is going to be making the Eastern Conference Finals, no matter if they're going up against Toronto or Boston in the first or second round?
Yeah, I think they have to get the top 3 seeds because I think I'm very scared to play Boston in a series if Hayward and Kyrie are both healthy. I think, though, if you look back at the series last year, and I know obviously the Celtics didn't have their 2 best players, every game was close until I think it was besides Game 3. Every game was close at the end, and the Sixers just kind of showed how immature they were, and Brett Brown just got out-coached, plain and simple, in the last 2 minutes of those games. I think the Raptors are actually a better-built team for the regular season. I think the Sixers, once you cut it down to an 8 or 9-man rotation in the playoffs, are a better team. But I think the Raptors are a little bit deeper when it comes to playing 82 games because we obviously know Embiid. We still don't know if he's going to play back-to-backs on the road. We don't know what the whole minute restriction is going to be, and we don't know how long they're going to let Fultz go in the regular season. So I think grabbing the 3 seed is probably realistic. I think the Raptors get the 2 seed and the Celtics get the 1 seed. But I think in the playoffs they could take the Raptors in a 6-game series probably.
And just to stat check you real quick, Game 3 was the OT game, the infamous Marco Bellinelli shot. The only one that was really a blowout was that could be considered a blowout was Game 1, 117-101 win for Boston. But going back to at least coming into this season, I think the biggest thing for the 76ers team, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, is consistency. And you kind of bring up at least Markelle Fultz. He's got to be consistently playing for this team, consistently out there on the floor. Obviously, we know the injury to Zaire Smith fracturing his foot. Obviously, that is a big hit right away, having your rookie be out. We saw them deal with that last year with Markelle Fultz, the year before with Ben Simmons. I mean, obviously for, 3 years with Joel Embiid. I think consistency and being consistently healthy for the Sixers is going to be big. But also, you look last year, and this team was very up and down. This team was, at 500 a lot of the season. You look back at, I think it was around, it was right here on January 15th. They were exactly 20-20. Then you go all the way to February 3rd. They were 25-25. Then they started to pull out some wins. Then they started losing again, and then it wasn't until that March 15th game where they won the first of that row of 15 games that they won to finish out 52-30. But before they went on that run, they were 36-30. So this team wasn't consistently getting wins. They were consistently staying 500 and a couple games above 500 until that long streak and a couple long streaks at the end of the season. Do you think consistency is a large part of the success that Philadelphia is going to need to have in 2017 or 2018, 2019?
Yeah, I think that was one of the big reasons they traded for Wilson Chandler and they brought back Amir Johnson because, well, I don't really like Amir Johnson. I guess he's consistent. He's not gonna cost you games or anything like that. And Wilson Chandler off the bench is a nice veteran to have because, again, talking about consistency, Robert Covington was so inconsistent last year. He was like lights out at certain parts of the year, and then other times he made like 1-3 in 5 games. And then in the playoffs, we talked about his defense. He just got completely burnt. But even I think the injuries was the big thing consistency-wise because is Embiid going to be able to play 70-plus games? And just to call out Bill a little bit because he was making fun of the Sixers and their glass feet during Kevin Love's segment last week. They did go on that 15-game win streak last year without Joel Embiid. So even when he got hurt, they still played well. And that was basically when Fultz was useless as well. So just to call out saying that they aren't a guarantee to make the playoffs, I was taken back by that statement last week. But if they can get consistency, I think they're fine. It's just all about, like I said, I think this entire season rides on where Markelle Fultz falls and if Drew Hanlon is actually a wizard with his shot or not.
Well, Ricky, and I think we're talking about the expectations for the Philadelphia 76ers. We got to have to throw in Markelle Fultz. I mean, playing what we expect to be his first full year in the NBA. We saw a little bit of him last year. Obviously, wasn't trusted in the playoffs at all. Brett Brown was very hesitant to use him. I mean, used him very little in the playoffs to barely nothing in the playoffs. So what do you have expectation-wise for Markelle Fultz? Are you just wanting to see something out of him and not specific stat lines? Do you just want to see a shot develop? What's the biggest thing and what's the expectations for Markelle Fultz?
The way I would put it is I want to see him live up to maybe, I know it's in year 2, technically year 1, because it'll be his first, hopefully, full year that he's playing, but I want to see a reason of, okay, why did we draft him? Like, why did we draft him where he was? Because last year, he didn't play enough games, or, like, at the end, I know it was like, ooh, there's some good play from Markelle Fultz, but I want to see him play and be like, okay, that is why. So Sixer fans can go, that is why we drafted him. Because for me, the way I see it, and Jake, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, I also want to see it to where it's like, okay, when Ben's not out there running the floor, can we put you out there and can you run our second unit? Can you be our second point guard, basically, when Ben Simmons is not out there? And I think it all circles back. You mentioned it with Brett Brown not really wanting to play him much. I think it all circles back, and I'll get to it in a second, of Brett Brown, and is he right for this 76er team?
Well, before we get to Brett Brown, I want to throw 2 questions out to Jake. And it goes into, obviously, what is Markelle's role on this team. But first I want to go to you, Jake, and say, have you had that moment with Markelle Fultz where you, like Ricky said, Sixers fans should want to see that moment that say, all right, this is why we drafted the kid. Have you seen that moment or any of these moments and been like, all right, this is why we drafted this kid. This is why he was worth number 1 overall, especially looking back where you could have had a guy like Jason Tatum?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big proponent last year when we traded up to number 1, taking Jason Tatum, because I thought he was the best player in the draft. But there was
Markelle Fultz?
No, taking Jason Tatum.
You wanted to trade up to 1 and take Jason Tatum?
No, when we traded up, because the Celtics were going to take Jason Tatum if they had the number 1 pick still. They even said we traded down and we still got the guy we were going to take.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was a big proponent of trading up and taking Tatum, but because the whole move, I love Markelle Fultz, and I think he's going to be good, but they were stating the entire last offseason, we're going to play Ben Simmons at point guard, and then they went out, traded up to number 1, and took a point guard. Mm-hmm. That just didn't really make sense to me. But 2 moments last year, I think it was against the Hawks. I don't forget who he posterized, but he just showed he is crazy athletic, and he has a huge wingspan. So he has the body to be good in the NBA, and it's just like his first poster in the NBA, and it was awesome. And then the other one was where he was the youngest player in NBA history to drop a triple-double. So, like, there are flashes that are there. He just needs to put it together. And I think his role eventually is going to be he's going to have to be the starting 2 guard, so that he has to be able to shoot. Because I think Redick's probably gone after this year. We even saw this year he said he almost signed with the Pacers. Mm-hmm. I think the expectation is to have him be able to start at the 2 because I think T.J. McConnell is the backup point guard. I don't think they want to draft Fultz number 1 and then just have him as a backup his entire career.
Well, and I think the biggest thing that I saw, at least from Markelle Fultz, because I mean, offensively he was fine. He tried to get to the bucket as much as he possibly could. He wasn't drawing a ton of contact, and even when he was drawing a ton of contact, he wasn't great from the free throw line. It still looked like he was very hesitant, even shooting from the free throw line, which should be very basic for an NBA player. I know a lot of us are still shell shocked when we see an NBA player who can't shoot a free throw. Mm-hmm. And it looked like he was very hesitant out there, and then the lights were getting to him. So hopefully, obviously, he's able to at least show more physicality driving and is more willing to take contact, because I think the biggest comparison that we at least saw before the NBA draft was a guy like James Harden, who we've seen consistently, create a lot of contact, create a lot of space between his defender, drive in, go to the free throw line, 11 times a game. And I think if he wants to be that type of player that can be transcendent, I think a big part of his game is going to be driving. And so he does have that long wingspan. He does have that crazy athleticism. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that I want to see from his offensive game, because obviously the shot is important, and I'm not denying that. But if he's at least has that ability to drive, then maybe he does just develop into the backup one, because his shot developing is a large question, especially with his shoulder injury, especially what was going on with that. His seemingly intense either anxiety or whether it's the Rick Ankiel situation where he has the yips. Obviously, that's a big thing. So if he can at least work on something that he showed in his driving ability, I think that's going to be something massive for a guy like Markelle. But let's go into the... Well,
I mean, the one thing I want to throw in about Markelle before we move on, too, is you say, he's got to vastly improve his shot. Well, if it comes true what Jake said, where I'll be honest, you're not going to... Why would you draft a guy number 1, like Jake said? Why would you draft a guy number 1 to be your backup point guard? You're going to have to shoot if you want to play the 2. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to shoot, then why would we put you at the 2?
I think it's got to be building blocks. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. We can't. I mean, this kid is still extremely young. I think he's still younger than I. He wouldn't be rapidly older than I am.
My biggest problem with Markelle coming in from college, and yet this might not play into the NBA because he's got Joe, he's got Ben, he's got guys that can be like, no, you know what? We're the leaders of this team. We can take it in these moments, but. In college, he'd be like, we're playing Oregon State? Cool, I'm a ball out. Oh, wait, we're playing a bigger team like number 8 Gonzaga or like a bigger team in the Pac-12? All right, I'm not going to show up tonight. That was my big thing. But if he's going to be like the starting 2 and be behind, obviously, star-wise, Joe and Ben, that's not going to be that big of a negative in the NBA.
No, I never really saw that mentality from him when saying that he didn't show up to big games against.
Well, no, I'm saying his play. He played like duty against big teams. He would ball out against Oregon State and then have like an okay game and not necessarily that star game against the big ones.
I'm saying I disagree with that because again, when he went up against a team like UCLA, he was going up against Lonzo Ball, who showed himself to be a very good defender. And again, he was the only player on that team. And even then, when he went up against UCLA, he put up 25 points per game on 47 shooting and 44 from 3. Or even an Arizona team. He had 16 and 26 against them. He was very up and down, but again, he was the only player on that team, so that's why it was tough for him to go up against a Gonzaga. He still put up 25 points, but he didn't have a great shooting night. But again, he's not going to be a leader on that team. It's Joe's team. He's got the personality. He's got the leadership. And it's Ben's team as well. And as long as Markelle can take those building blocks, like I said, at least show the ability to drive and then just show the shot every now and then and just build up that confidence, I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him. But something that Ricky said, and I want to bring this into and kind of the back end of the question, because if these 76ers don't hit these expectations, Jake, what is the future for Brett Brown if the Sixers aren't making to the Eastern Conference Finals and they aren't a top 3 seed in 2018-2019?
I mean, I think he stays on because he just signed an extension. I don't think they get rid of him anytime soon. He needs to show some improvement of game time management, because there was a couple times in that Boston series where I think we were up like 8 at one point, and they go on like a 12-0 run, and he just doesn't call a timeout the entire time. And then late in the game, they run. I forget which game it was. Al Horford with like 5 seconds left and on inbound gets wide open under the basket with nobody guarding him, and just gets a layup to win the game. Like it's all the game time management stuff. But I don't think he's a really good player development coach, and I think he's improving with how good Joe and Ben have been already, and hopefully how good Markelle is. But I think if they don't hit expectations this year, I think, and tying Marco Fultz into it, I think Fultz has a big part in, like I said, how this team succeeds. And if he shows that he only can be a backup point guard, I think they'll probably end up trading him and trying to get a wing because that's what they desperately need. But with Brett Brown, I think he's not a GM. I think he's proven that this offseason. I think that's loud and clear. I think he has 2 years to get the team to the conference finals. And if they don't make it to the conference finals in 2 years, I think they'd probably get rid of him.
The one thing I will bring up with the contract extension, you're right, he did just sign a 3-year extension back in March.
4 more years he'll be with the team.
But the thing that I want to bring up with that is the Colangelo stuff had not happened yet. That was pre-Colangelo being fired and then Brett Brown being moved up. And that was before Jerry Colangelo said he was going to be leaving. I believe it's after this year. So, I mean, the guys that did re-sign him, and I'm not saying that it's a for sure certain that he's going to be, sticking around. And again, a contract is a contract. But, maybe with that shift of the Colangelos leaving and Brett Brown not producing, maybe that would lead ownership to possibly looking on to getting rid of him. I'm not saying that, if they don't hit the expectations, they for sure will. But at least, the two guys that at least re-signed him, Colangelo, both of Jerry and Brian Colangelo, maybe that would lead to possibly Brett being moved out.
And I mean, like we mentioned earlier, like this, I think it was either you or Ben said, or you and Jake said, hey, you know what? Why did they not hire a GM? Why did they just make Brett Brown the GM for right now? And I feel like part of it is, hey, we didn't want to hire a guy and him go, this ain't my guy. Boom, get rid of him or get rid of him after this season. How I kind of see this playing out is I agree with Jake. 2 years would be the minimum that I think Brett Brown is there, but I would not be surprised if he's there for the rest of that 4 years, because like Jake said, he is good at player development, but you got to look at it. Let's say he plays out his next 4 years. We get to the offseason in 2022. Ben's going to be 26 by that time. Joe's going to be 28 by that time. Markel's going to be 24 if he's still on the team. Like Jake said, they could trade him for something else if they need to. I kind of have a feeling that Brett Brown is going to run into the Boston Celtics quite a bit in the playoffs, and the Celtics are going to win. And each time, what will happen is Sixer fans like Jake will sit there and go, why can't we have a coach like Brad Stevens? Why can't we have a coach like... Because if Brad Stevens was the coach of the Sixer team last year, they go to the finals.
Ricky, how many teams can you say that for? I mean,
no, I know. But like,
Brad Stevens is one of the top 3 coach in the NBA.
I say that because I look at it and I think that when it's all said and done and we look 10 years down the line, Brett Brown, I'm kind of going to relate it, not exactly, but in a sense, to what I saw with my Chicago Cubs. He is going to be the Rick Renteria of the Sixer team, where it's like he was never going to be the guy that is going to bring us over the hump. We're like, they're going to go through this. He's going to develop their guys. Then they're going to go out and they're going to get their Joe Madden type of head coach. And that's when the 76ers will see success and be in the finals with the core they have right now in their prime.
Jake, you got a rebuttal?
I could see that happening, but it's really weird. Like this, the reason that everybody loves Brett Brown is because there's been 2 people that have been there since the beginning of the process. It's him and Covington. That's really it. And every player loves Brett Brown, and the whole ownership loves him. I think it all just depends who they bring in as the GM whenever they do, if they do. I think if they make him president of basketball operations, which I guess is a possibility, then he'll be on for the long haul. I think I'm not going to rush. I think right after the playoff series, I think I remember having a conversation with Sean on Twitter. I was like, they need to fire Brett Brown. They need to do like blah, blah, blah. I think it was a really big overreaction. I think just like the players, that was the first time he has ever been in a playoff, like high pressure situation. I think he crumbled under the pressure. I think it was just kind of one of the things where he's never done it before. So he kind of learns from his mistakes. I think, because even during the regular season, he did that a lot where he just wouldn't call a timeout. He just kind of lets the players play. Like they would have situations at end of games where they're tie game to win it with the basket. He just wouldn't call a timeout. They just run a play they already knew. It's just kind of like, I think it'll come with experience with him, and I'll be interested to see this year whenever they face the Raptors or the Celtics or whoever in the playoffs, and it's late in the game to see how he handles it this time, because I think it'll be different. But I think like I said, 2 years with him, I don't think they'll fire him to hire somebody unless like a big coach comes on the market. But I don't think they'll face the Celtics every year because we know Kyrie's going to the Knicks with Jimmy Butler, right?
It's true. That could happen. But, I mean, the one thing I will say is depending on how often they meet the Celtics in the playoffs in these next 4 years with Brett Brown under contract, the way I could totally see it going win-loss-wise is between the Celtics, between basically Brad Stevens and Brett Brown. I could see us looking at it after 4 years almost the same way we look at Bill Belichick versus Tomlin with the Steelers, where it's like,
well,
you've got Brett.
Coach.
Exactly. But you look at it, we're looking at it going, man, just if the Sixers had a better coach, maybe they compete with the Celtics. Like, that's what I think we'll look at. And the thing that, I mean, I don't know where I necessarily sit on this, where when you have a guy, because like you said, he and Covington have been with the process. They're the only ones that are still on the team that have been there. Do you necessarily want a coach that has been kind of in that culture of losing? Because that was the culture of the 76ers, hence why we have the process.
But Brett Brown was also under Popovich and the Spurs, so he's also been in a culture of winning before that.
But he wasn't the head coach, is what I'm saying.
No, I know what you mean.
But I think also, I mean, you can keep comparing him to Rick Renteria. I mean, Renteria was literally there for a year.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying like exactly. No, I'm saying like he's the one who'll get fired, someone else will come in, and then the Sixers go to the promised land.
I don't think that's going to happen because, like Jake said, and I tend to agree with him on this, that was the first time the 76ers were in this moment. They had that 15-game winning streak. I mean, it was complete shell shock out there. Yes, they had the series with Miami, and yes, Spoelstra is a fantastic coach, but it's different when you're going up against a team that you are pretty even or fairly even. Or, I think Boston was favored in the series. You were expected to be in a tough battle. The Celtics punched back. They weren't really ready for it. Let's see how that bounces back. Now, if Brett Brown keeps making these mistakes, then I think that's something where this conversation is really going to be amped up to the next level. But anyways, that's going to wrap up the expectations for the Sixers. But Jake, you're not off the hook yet. We are doing our shooting guard rankings right after we get off the phone with you. The camera is dead. But where do you think JJ Redick should be falling in our shooting guard rankings?
I don't know. He almost left us to go to the Pacers. I don't know how I feel about him, honestly.
Dude, could you imagine him on the Pacers? Oof.
I have him going to my Eastern Conference Finals.
No. Hey, all I can say is Zaire Smith, 2019-2020 Rookie of the Year. Okay?
We have JJ in the top 15, so I'll at least say that.
Okay.
I'm not going to spoil it. But thank you, Jake, for joining us. We are excited to have you on next month as well, and maybe we'll finally jump into the MJ LeBron discussion that we've been talking so much about on Twitter. Thanks so much for the support, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, guys.